my sound, so I hide way under the ground. Better tell them I got a 9-2. They all are big, so they are swine flu. Move.
Gotta run, Babylon protector, no chains can hold me. Mr. Arrested, death door, if they come and stay with the collector. All problems we have, we know selector.
Tell us about being convicted for 2 live crews, as nasty as they want to be.
That's right. Well, I remain the only person, because even Luke Campbell and the band 2 Live Crew, they had the Florida Court of Appeal overturn their conviction. But I was convicted of obscenity in what was a deliberate challenge to overturn the obscenity laws. In 1990, the Ontario Provincial Police declared that anyone who sold Nasty As They Want to Be by the 2 Live Crew would be charged for distributing obscenity. Now, we didn't even sell new CD releases in that era. We were a bookstore. But every single record store refused to handle it and gave in to the censorship. So I bought 100 copies over from Detroit and announced with a full half-page ad in our daily paper that we were going to sell them and that we welcome getting charged and that we welcome going to court. So the second guy in the lineup was the police officer. He came and bought a copy, went back and got a search warrant. Mind you, we'd already sold them by the time he showed up later on that day. We had lineups around the block, the largest lineup I have ever had in my store, except for when we were selling illegal marijuana magazines and books, and we had huge lineups then too. So we sold out the 2 Live Crew CD in the space of an hour, the 100 of them. We got charged for it. We went to court. One of the funniest court cases I've ever seen, because we weren't allowed to play the music in court, which is normally the case, to determine if it's obscene. The prosecutor had to read it aloud, which to me is a fraudulent presentation, because it's the music and the lyrics and everything combined that determines to me if something is not obscene or musical or any number of things. Whereas the district attorney, the Crown attorney, reading the lyrics on, oh, me so horny, me so horny, me love you long time, made everybody in the audience crack up. Everybody's howling with laughter. The judge was banging his gavel saying there's no laughing matter. But the point is, it was a laughing matter. It was hilarious from beginning to end. And the judge had to clear the courtroom several times and bring everybody back and then start again. So to me, if everybody laughs from beginning to end, it's not obscene. And we should have won our case. But in fact, the judge came back and said, it's certainly obscene, guilty. Right? And so I lost my challenge to the obscenity laws. But you know what? Sometimes when you lose, you win. Because they never tried to ban any kind of music ever again in Canada after that, because it was such a reversal, because it made the album more popular, it created a lot of mystique about it, and now you can sell it anywhere. So even then, it wasn't a ban that was based in law, it wasn't a court order, it wasn't a criminal conviction, it was the police just going around, you know, pushing their muscle on people, and that's why it didn't succeed, because one person, just one person spoke back.
And how is it meeting Ed Rosenthal, Stephen Hager, and Jack Hare?
Well, I met them all. Ed Rosenthal I first met at the Ann Arbor Hash Bash in 1989. I remember a line he said when we were in his hotel room, and he was looking around. We were talking away furiously, meeting each other for the first time, and then he goes, "What's wrong with this picture?" I'm looking around, and there's something wrong with this picture. And he said, "There's no weed in this pipe." Right? And that was just kind of a funny early Ed Rosenthal story. So I first met Ed at the Hash Bash, and Ed and I have had a wonderful working relationship for much of those 20 years. He appeared in our magazine for 9 years as Ask Ed, Question and Answers by Ask Ed. And he's a wonderful, eccentric man who's brilliant at what he does. And I've always enjoyed our relationship with him. And Steve Hagar, I met when I brought him to London, Ontario in 1990. And we had a wonderful dinner at the Art Gallery where hundreds of people came. And we had a big discussion. And when you look at the movie Principle of Pot, there's a nice little excerpt of Steve Hagar saying, and this is in 1990, if the United States had just 100 Marc Emerys, marijuana would be legal today. And you know, that stuck in my mind, because when I started giving out all the money, there was millions of dollars to people all throughout the United States, I'm thinking I'm paying to create a whole bunch of Marc Emerys. And so Steve Hagar was right. There's hundreds and hundreds of Marc Emerys running around the United States now, and marijuana legalization is happening. One other person too, Jack Herrera,
yes,
got me into this movement, because in 1990 I put on a concert bringing Jello Biafra to Centennial Hall in London, Ontario, where I'm from. And Jello Biafra I love the Dead Kennedys, and he left the Dead Kennedys, who were doing spoken word tours, right? So he came to Centennial Hall, and we sold out 450 seats, just enough to pay him. It was $3,000 to bring him. And part of his thing, it's from the CD I Blow Minds for a Living, which he put out in 1998, and there's a segment called Grow More Pot. And it's not like Jello Biafra does smoke pot, he doesn't. But what he said is, he talked about Jack Herrera's book and the great conspiracy to suppress the story about hemp. So when he said, I hope you can get this book here in Canada, I pointed out, no, that book has been banned. that book is illegal in Canada. And he went, wow. And so I determined that I was going to break that ban, and I brought the book in, and I flew Jack Herrera up to sign an autograph at that day. And we had a wonderful day. Hundreds of people came and bought the book and got him to sign it. And then after that, we brought Ed Rosenthal up, and he signed all his Grow books. And then we brought Steve Hager up to sign all his High Times magazines. And we had huge selections. And there was a huge pent-up demand because it had been banned for years and years. So people wanted to come and see what it was all about. Where is this magazine? Why can't we get it? So I met each one of them after I flew them. I met Ed at the Ann Arbor Hatchback, but later on I would fly him up to London, Ontario, and all three of them would come and meet the people and sign things, and that's how I got to meet them all, and that's the first activism I did in regarding legalizing marijuana. First thing we had to do is legalize the books, legalize the magazines.
And your efforts of success have been made being featured on the Wall Street Journal. Tell us about this.
That's actually now 10 years, that's 15 years old. That's December 5th, 1995. And that was a wonderful coverage, but unfortunately I knew it was going to get me in trouble, and sure enough I got raided just 3 weeks later. Every time I was in big, huge U.S. media like the CNNs, I got raided right after. When I was in Rolling Stone, I got raided a third time, and so on it would go. And the Wall Street Journal, though, the headline was, "Pot Seed Merchant Winked at by Police Prospers in Canada." Well, any headline that says you're being winked at by police when you're doing something probably illegal, as it was, then you're going to get raided. So that was an unfortunate headline, but it was a lovely article. And the fellow who wrote that one, Quentin Hardy, to this day remains a friend of mine. He has since gone on to work at the San Jose Mercury and Forbes magazine and Forbes television. And he still writes me every 6 months or so to see how I'm doing and what have you.
And tell us how it feels to be a featured presenter at Idea City, hosted by Moses Neimer.
Well, first of all, Moses is a wonderful person and a pot smoker, and a really shrewd business person, and always surrounds himself with very entertaining, enjoyable, and intellectual events and people. And I spoke at Idea City in the year 2001 and 2003, and I really enjoyed those presentations. And I bet, because they've been on television, my speeches were on television, you can probably still find video footage of my speeches there. And they're really great speeches, too. The background is really cool. Again, part of my Idea City presentation briefly shows up in the movie Principle of Pie.
And how was it taking on the Tsar John Walters giving speech on the war on drugs?
Well, you seem to have zeroed in on all the things that got me into trouble. And so that's what we should call this. Trouble is my business, maybe like a detective story. What happened when John Walters, he announced he was coming to Vancouver. He wanted to convince everybody, including the mayors and the police, that this so-called legalization thing was all wrong and we shouldn't be allowing safe injection sites, and this whole, modernization of the war on drugs into a drug peace, into a regulated and tax, he wanted to come here and stop that. So that was at the Board of Trade, and it was actually $500 for a table of 10. So there were 6 tables of police officers, 2 tables from the U.S. consulate. There was the mayor and a whole bunch of other politicals and big businesses like FedEx and stuff. People who want to do business in the U.S. and want to look good. Well, I found out about it. I bought a table for 10 and took 9 other activists, and we heckled John Walters unmercifully until he melted down on television in the news. And then after that, he swore vengeance on me. And that's when the U.S. DEA and Justice Department investigation of me started right after that. Within days, I was being investigated by the U.S., and a lot of money and officers and people and time were put into making sure I was going to end up in a U.S. prison.
And what is the Toker's Bowl?
The Toker's Bowl was this wonderful thing we put on from 2002 to 2005. At first, it was on the first weekend in May, but then it moved to July 1st to 4th, so we could bookend it with the Canadian holiday, which we have a nice display down at the art gallery on July 1st, and then end on the American holiday, so it would give them time to get home. And it was a wonderful time. They would pay like $600, $800 to come here, and that would cover 4 incredible parties, boat cruises, bus trips, and you'd get 25 different kinds of pot, about 1.5 grams each, right? And then it would all be marked from A to Z, and then you would smoke them and rate them, and then you wouldn't know what strain they were, just have a letter, and then we would assemble all the results at the end, and there would be a top 3 winners, right? And those people get trophies. We had big trophies for the growers who made those ones. And then most people couldn't get through all the pot they had. So we did that for 4 years, and it was just the most wonderful time. It happened right in this building, downstairs, and we would have wonderful parties in here, and it was the most lovely day. And if people Google Toker's Bowl, there's probably a lot of video on Pot TV about the various Toker's bowls from those years. I even have a Toker's bowl. The bowl itself, there's nothing left in it, but oddly enough, some sage is in here. I don't know what sage is doing. Sage, and I wish it was called sage weed, but it wasn't. So you'd get this little bowl, and it says right there, Cannabis Culture's 4th Annual Tours of 2005. So that was the last one. And then inside here, you would get your ballot and like 25 little envelopes that from marked from A to Z that had the marijuana in them. And then you could either take it with you. A lot of people couldn't smoke it on if they were Canadian. They could take it home. And the Americans, unfortunately, would have to give it away before they went back. So
I chase.
No matter what they say, no matter what they do, stay on green when running from the red and blue. Pigs fly, so Obama got his chance to lose. It's a trap like walking right into a noose.
Now they've been chasing all day, cause I've been hustling all night. Sir, loosen up, cause my cuff's too